Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the patience, for the delay. We will start soon in order to avoid further delays. And where is the, oh, sorry, I don't know where is the, here. My name is Giovanni Allegretti from the University of Coimbra, and I'm here with Cesare Ottolini of the International Alliance of Inhabitants, and we have two persons that were supposed to speak from distance, but they sent some videos in order to avoid technical issues here. So we will be actually 4 persons. And we are in a seminar on the challenges of participatory democracy for AI, which continues somehow the previous session that we have in the House of Biscuits just 1 hour ago. It finished 1 hour ago, and it was built together with Anders North from SALAR, the Swedish Association of Local and Regional Authorities. So we will be continues this session having specific goal. We call this session with the different subtitles from the other. It's the need for a strategy, because we have the main goal to widen the awareness of the impact of AI on local communities at international level on issue of like housing, urban planning and governance. But also our main goal is to start a discussion for proposing an alliance of democratic institutions, social and academic organizations that could exchange, analyze, train and do implementation of tools able to challenge the AI through defending participatory democracy, human and also environmental rights. In the previous section, we showed this drawing, which is the left one is coming from the Pioneer AI Act, the regulatory framework of the European Union on the use of AI, which is built on a sort of risk-based approach. You can see there are 4 levels of risk of AI systems. The first are the minimal ones, which are a larger number, and then we have limited risk, which require a specific level of transparency, so specific measures of transparency in order to happen, and then transparency of the algorithm, transparency of the process and the results, and those who maintain the power on the programming of AI. And then we have high risk and those on unacceptable risk, which the European Union does not allow to take place in our continent. And if we said that if we go to democracy, possibly the 2 last categories are not allowed, because having high risk for democracy is unacceptable. We are thinking about AI as useful tool for intensifying efficiency and participatory practice, increasing the attractiveness, reducing the participant fatigue. But we did an experiment using some tables where people were discussing, and we clusterized through AI the results of the discussion that people presented, and on 2 issues, how AI can add value and develop participatory and democratic process, and then the second was how can we ensure that the voices of human and natures remain at the center of participatory democratic process using AI. And when the AI clustered the data we collect through Menti, it was interesting that several persons in the room protested of the way they didn't recognize themselves in the cluster. They didn't think that the cluster were like saying all the things that they were supposed to mean. They interpreted some words in a different way. Some even used their knowledge of AI to put ambiguous sentences that could be misinterpreted by the AI. And in the end, in the discussion, it was clear that even a small marginal use of AI in a participatory process can be criticized as a reduction of the complexity of democratic practice. And so it was clear that AI cannot be used as an input to imagine inputs for a discussion, a human-based discussion, and they cannot produce the output because the output must be controlled by people. And in the end, it was clear that the AI only can be used in democratic participatory process to rework sometimes, to help in a dynamic way a human-based discussion more than, what was interesting is that people was asking if we can use AI also as a provocation to imagine other things than those that have been proposed by people. They can add levels of complexity that then people can discuss. But all of this means that the AI is welcome when it's in the middle of a sequence of democratic act, but not when it is in the base or it's in the top and in the end of a discussion. So we finalizing the previous session and its inputs to this session. We worked on seeing that how democracy and AI can meet each other. And if we talk about participatory democracy, the AI works well, is welcome partially in a small space that is already pre-decided that will be hosting participatory democratic practice, but then the risks are not there. The risks are out when actors which are considered democratic actors try to fold the decision-making to their own interests. So a series of lobbyism acts that intervene not on the participatory process, but on the larger series of policies that are being built in our institution at local, regional, and other levels. And so while we are very aware of external threats to democracy by foreign powers, bad intention and hacking, there are more difficult in understanding how other actors can use AI to divert the intensity of our democracy. For sure, we questioned something very simple in the previous question. What's the concept of efficiency that Menti programmers used in order to clusterize in that form the conclusions of each group table? We don't know, because that's the problem, the intransparency of the majority of AI, how they are programmed, and what concept of efficiency and efficacy are used by the AI in order to work on our speeches and conclusions. And for that reason, the sense of this question is also to start to imagining what we can do together. Now we quoted social algorithms that exist in some energy communities, for example, forms of collective monitoring and oversight of the AI. But all of these questions, for example, our capacity as social movements, as people interested to democracy, to question the AI, because they are very complex, they require strong specific expertise, and many of the social movements are basing their work on volunteering. And volunteering has not enough time, energy, intellectual or cultural resources to dedicate it to a fight against something that is produced with a lot of billions by superpowers. And so how can we organize we have some projects recently, for example, the Equitas project, the Bias project that are funded by the European Union in order to work on how, for example, AI can be debiased, for example, in recognizing some differential characteristic of people that in this moment are not taken properly into account. So the question is what we eventually can do as people fond of the intensity of democracy in order to join forces and try to intervene in the AI area with different proposals. And we will start now with two videos. The first one is short by Anacláudia Marinheiro Centeno Rossbach, which is now the executive director of UN Habitat, which is the agency of the United Nations that deal with the territorial issue and human settlements. You can start the video.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. Saudações a todas e todos. I am very pleased to address you at this 23rd session of the International Observatory on Participatory Democracy, which is crucial to advance participatory democracy in the world. This event and the effort to promote participatory democracy has never been more urgent. The complexity and scale of our common global challenges today require us to work together at all levels through participatory democracy, co-creating solutions with communities and stakeholders. The role of cities and local and regional governments is critical for promoting such participatory democracy. In our urban world, where 55% of the global population is living in urban areas, and will increase to 70% by 2050. At the same time, the rapid digital transformation that's happening globally presents both opportunities and risks for transforming participatory democracy in cities, depending on how it's governed and applied. Digital technology can make cities more inclusive, resilient, and prosperous, but this is only possible if it's used through a people-centered approach. People and their needs must come first before technology. Technology is a means, not an end, when adopting a people-centered approach. This is why UN Habitat, based on a request from 193 countries, is preparing international guidelines on people-centered smart cities. The guidelines will serve as the first global normative benchmark defining the principles, duties and actors to promote a people-centered approach to smart city development. Also, at the just concluded Summit of the Future in September 2024, world leaders adopted the Pact for the Future, which also includes a global digital compact. Both the international guidelines on people-centered smart cities and the global digital compact aim to promote inclusion, equity, and human rights as fundamental principles to create open, participatory, and secure digital and physical public spaces. Technologies such as artificial intelligence cannot and must not replace the true value and wealth of participatory inputs from communities or civil society organizations, networks, and associations. We must not lose the sight of the complex and refined insights and reflections that we must capture for participatory design and action for our common development challenges. Artificial intelligence, for instance, can only partially and not fully capture this. Artificial intelligence may not be able to capture the diversity of perspectives, practices, and needs of people and communities, or replace the complexities of collective collaboration and co-creation. Vulnerable groups may become even more invisible and marginalized. In fact, if not governed and applied well, artificial intelligence and other technologies can deepen discrimination, bias, disinformation, polarization, segmentation, and exclusion. So, while artificial intelligence has the potential to profoundly transform and improve the way we plan, manage, and govern our cities, we must understand its limits and manage the associated risks well. I leave you with 3 key thoughts in this regard. First, we must establish robust and participatory AI governance to foster inclusive and sustainable development. And this must be strongly grounded on ethical principles, human rights, and the sustainable development goals. The international guidelines on people-centered smart cities to be adopted in 2025 will contribute to this effort. Second, local governments play a critical role in shaping AI governance. Local governments have the role and the possibility to put in place governance practices that enhance participatory democracy, ensuring that AI initiatives reflect voices from diverse local realities. The international guidelines will provide guidance on the duties and responsibilities of different government levels and various actors. Third, as we face an AI divide, we must fortify AI capacity and expertise at local levels. We must build the capacities of all citizens so that they can all engage with AI technologies and benefit from their benefit. The international guidelines will offer guidance on how to build digital capacity and skills. I wish you the best with your deliberations. Bom trabalho a todas e todos. Obrigada.
The director of UN Habitats also quoted the Summit of the Future that was accompanied, maybe some of you know, by an experience of citizen assembly organized by the Stanford University that was dealing with feelings of people around the issue of AI, so ethical values to put at their base. So there are, she quoted a commission that is working on a sort of ethical guidelines, and so there are several, taking into account the aspect of the transformation of the territories, not only just the AI as a tool in general, but as a specific tool to govern the territory of our cities. And we know how many disasters have been done by some institution recently that used AI to increase financialization of their territories, of the housing stocks, for example, or mobility, giving a wrong inputs to the AI on what they have to decide for the sake of the public debt, for example, ignoring other dimension linked to citizen, for example. And now we have a second contribution by Miguel Valdez. I don't know if you can send it. Do I have to do something?
Muy buenas tardes.
Okay.
Soy Miguel Valdez, investigador y docente en el Departamento de Ingeniería e Innovación de la Universidad Abierta del Reino Unido. Como miembro del
Good afternoon, Miguel Valdez. I am a professor at the university, and the topic of AI is of a great interest to me. So this progress sometimes creates scientific fiction, distracting us from what's happening in our cities. One example of what's happening in this future is the program Alinea, a city in Saudi Arabia, which could be described with skyscrapers of incredible height. Cars will become unnecessary, high-speed trains, horizontal transports, and a number of sophisticated elevators where we will have an ecological city. This becomes a utopia. There is no space for hiding, and everything will work automatically One important aspect of this city of La Linea is that it depends on robots. According to the press, some tasks such as transporting goods, safety, the maintenance of public spaces will be carried out by autonomous robots, improving efficiency with a higher service for residents. This is scientific fiction. I know this could be problematic because it shows a city in a future that doesn't work without robots, that despises humans. Not everyone, but some marginalized groups. So La Linea also shows the temptation of cities with an excess of technology. This is a mistake we made before with cars, and we mustn't make again with robots. So a problem we will find again in the future are two trends which act on urbanistic robots, smart cities, and secondly, a transition from an automatic city to an autonomous city. So being a smart city is an unclear expression. It doesn't have a meaning. These are cities which develop an infrastructure of high connection with sensors, aggregating data through sensors and through digital footprints which we leave in any service. A smart city says that if we accumulate all this data among cities, citizens, and public bodies, this will be in synchrony to improve services. Oftentimes, this data remains in archives, and it is possible to optimize urban problems. The problem is that when problems persist in complex contexts, which require adaptability, intelligence, and autonomy. Luckily, this type of smart city needs sensors, data, and creating fertile land for AI. Indeed, this transition which distances us means that we will have an automatized city with many intelligences, creates a second term which has to do with cybersecurity, cybernetic systems. This is the way of culminating the automates that have been developed. Oftentimes, this AI is not more than the acceleration of these robots that work in factories, in production lines. These robots are in cages to prevent humans from interfering in their work, or even for humans. A more advanced application could be the case of Abu Dhabi, where the quick unmanned transportation system is an example. They are in a closed environment, so it's difficult to call them smart because they work when there is no chance to make decisions. It is the same as in the Heathrow Airport in the UK. It is difficult to say they are autonomous because they follow rules defined by humans in advance, considering all possible handicaps and eventualities. However, in some recent cases, robots were introduced in complex, unpredictable environments where they need to make decisions which humans could not predict and which make us closer to autonomy. In the case of the US, we have robots from 2019 introduced in industrial and academic environments, for example, in Virginia, to transport goods and food. These were complex environments, but safe. Robots were able to learn how to interact with the environment. Another way means that regulation was considerably simplified so that in Tokyo, within the Olympic Games, within the pandemic, robots were used as aids in airports and stadiums to avoid face-to-face contact. In Tokyo and Virginia, robots were introduced in a non-completely urban environment, in a closed environment. There is another case in San Francisco where there have been several attempts to introduce robots. So this is a disruptive technology. So citizens were not as tolerant regarding disruption as inventors. Indeed, there was resistance from the inhabitants from the needs of robots and humans who were in urban environments. That's why in 2017, the local authorities introduced a legislation that says that robots should be monitored by humans. Therefore, I have found in San Francisco these ones, for example, a team made by a human and a robot. So in a town near London, about 6 robots, cargo robots, were introduced by Starship Technology, which had an agreement with local organizations, and there was no regulatory framework, so the local authorities accepted the opportunity to create a precedent. The robots were manufactured to play a similar role as a postman, so the shopping was done through a phone app, and robots were doing the deliveries. They would move at 6 kilometers per hour. They could carry weight up until 10 kilograms. So we're talking about cereal boxes, milk carts. These robots are not very intelligent. The same type of robots as the ones from San Francisco. Their artificial intelligence cannot be used without creating conflicts. In this city, in the UK, it was more favorable because it followed the urban principles with little traffic, and robots were able to circulate in this environment without pedestrians, without bumping into traffic. So a robot which can learn how to navigate this environment can learn how to read and identify the environment. So little by little, they started navigating increasingly complex environments, and the city enabled robots to roam without human supervision. Besides, I think this is not a type of advanced intelligence. This is a limited kind of intelligence, though strategic, because robots, which are more limited, are more economic. Energetically speaking, it means that it is cheap, for example, for delivering a pint of milk. A robot is cheap, there is no labor cost, and there are also advantages in theory, because the emissions by a robot are much fewer in comparison with a robot, with the car that does delivery. In the case of this British city, the cities with more tools to respond in a crisis situation, this might seem tangential, but factors such as climate change are leading us to a permanent crisis with impacts for the governability of cities and also for the characteristic of autonomous systems. Robots were introduced in 2018 2020, the pandemic, which seemed very far, came to our cities. In the UK, one of the activities to control was stay at home, which meant that everybody did so. Panic shopping made everyone to go to the supermarket. So home delivery also increased. And suddenly there was a waiting list of 2 to 3 weeks for home delivery. So in the UK, this city where these robots were used, many people had difficulty because they couldn't leave their homes. They trusted robots to do the delivery, and the services collapsed because all these services depended on humans who were also exposed to the pandemic and who took weeks to find ways to operate, or people who needed help. So the 30 robots in this British city were still operating from day one with no interruptions, delivering the goods on the same day. This was a highly adapted system. People were not exposed, well, they were worked 16, 20 hours a day, no fatigue involved. And in several university campuses in the US, robots were also introduced, and robots which worked in the US were brought to the UK. In the beginning, they were 30, but they soon became 200. They worked as immigrants who were working in this British city without having any family concerns, having to learn the basics and adapting to a new city, because artificial intelligence is an intelligence which connects, which learns routines in few minutes without the need of providing training. So for robots, they played a very important role, which gave credibility and created a precedent. As consequence, there are about 500 robots operating in 6 cities in the UK, which have been operating after the pandemic restrictions. We are still analyzing this, but suggests that the use of robots can significantly improve cities.
Los robots fueron introducidos como una continuación de la lógica de la ciudad inteligente y por lo mismo obedecen su misma lógica comercial.
Sometimes we know that they don't respond to everybody's needs. The fact is that they require a specific infrastructure that is not available everywhere, and so there is the possibility of increasing the exclusion, the digital exclusion of some populations. Of course, there is the possibility that the technology brings about negative aspects, but it's not the technology's fault. It all depends on how these robots and these structures can get organized with the population. So this is an example that I gave you. It's a smaller town with have just a few hundred inhabitants, a few 100,000 inhabitants, but they really showed that it is possible to deal with automation. So in this process of thinking about this, there are several questions that arose and that are posed. Is like, how can we control the days and the robots that come to us?
Some AI, which are linked to the idea of robots, because they have a body. No, so they occupy space, they can have some type of conflict, which are not just the conflict we had in the previous meeting, that were about intellectual interpretation, way of, I mean, just something more immaterial, but they also have a presence in the space. And as you saw when he was talking about the robot of the North American campus that were sent like migrants to Milton Keynes during the pandemic, so 170 robots that summed up with the 30 that already exists in the town in order to increase the level of services for the people in a more vulnerable condition. And they passed the border very easily in relation to migrants, no? So, and this idea that he centered in the end is that we have a lot of rules, and rules are the elements which are more important in this moment in order to reflect on how AI can dialogue with humans, and the example that he did of San Francisco that coupled a robot and an accompanying person that was a human being, because was the only way to avoid some conflicts in the streets. It's an interesting reflection on this need of a hybrid environment in which human interest can control somehow also some deviation of in this case the robots. So it just we chose Miguel because he's working on something that's have a strong imaginary, you know, and especially in urban terms. But now we get back to a human being here present, which is Cesare Ottolini, that is the coordinator of something very, very human-based, which is the International Alliance of Inhabitants, and he will propose a last reflection because dialoguing with those that remained of you due to the delays also, and okay, Cesare, talk.
Gracias a todos y a todas. Es importante para nosotros hacer una reflexión muy fuerte sobre lo que está pasando sobre nuestra cabeza y cómo posiblemente podríamos,
thank you for being here. It's actually the right moment to think about what is actually going over our heads. Participative democracy is a place of resistance, re-exist and reflect. So we have here the possibility to make some proposals to link democratic institutions and the inhabitants that resist in those cities that are rebelling against the entrance of artificial intelligence. We are not talking about using technology. We're talking about something in a deeper meaning. We're not just talking about robotization. It's a good thing to have robots, but now we already see robots that are already police officers that can shoot people. Now in the United States, they are considering the use of robots to evict somebody from a house without intervention of a person. So when we're talking about this, just imagine what can happen. Imagine like a mayor who decides that uses that. So in that situation, it's not actually a person deciding. It's not something in the future. People are thinking about this nowadays. There's an artificial intelligence tool that is already being used in these legal settings. Of course, we feel more relaxed because we heard the other speaker saying that there will be a global artificial intelligence compact to be signed. But the thing is that we are not hearing the opinions of the right people. I'm not sure that the people in this observatory, I don't think they are a part of that work. And I don't think that the citizens are actually being involved. What is involved and what is being listened to is the company that owns this artificial intelligence program or software. And so we are seeing here a risk linked to these smart cities. Of course, it's good to have automated functions and that people can just put their minds into other aspects, but there's the risk of going beyond that. We may face the risk of having robots behind the decision-making processes. And afterwards, there's something else that Miguel mentioned, which are the automatic cities that are already a step ahead. So we are considering that there may be cities that could already have this project, this futuristic projects, but the fact is that there are already $500 billion invested. So I don't think the investors are very interested in participatory or participative democracy. This is in Saudi Arabia, and we know that they really have some democratic aspects, but now they have already given a citizenship to a robot. And that robot is called Sophia, and it has more rights than some people do. So we need to pay attention to all of that. We need to pay attention to these smart cities, these automated cities, and then the passage to other kinds of cities. So the first step for this automation of cities was done during the pandemic, of course, but afterwards, we know that they are being used during the Ukrainian and Russian war. There are drones being used with a single goal: to kill. Of course, this will not be the only setting that the robots will be used. There are other crises that affect you more. For instance, the tax crisis, the financial crisis, the lack of resources to implement the services that the citizens need. We have a lower amount of people working, therefore there's a lower amount of tax paid because the owners of the artificial intelligence platforms do not pay any taxes. So there's all of this wealth that is taken away from the cities. So how can we attract it back? The answer is that the owners of the artificial intelligence should attract investors. For instance, NeoCity. So they should make a town attractive for those who are investing, and local authorities have to deliver services and deliver and give the key of the city to this different stakeholders. So in the future, the mayor will only have a power that is just on paper, because the decision has already been made by the person who wants to invest in that city. So the investor comes and says, I will solve your financial problems, but I demand in return something else. So the power is now in my hand. And this is not in a future that distant. We have that already in our smartphones. We are delivering wealth to the hands of the stakeholders who own the artificial intelligence platforms. So how can we stop this from happening? Who are we? Who are the ones that share the principles of democracy? So local authorities, organizations of inhabitants, yes, the UN, the governments, of course, but we need to reform the way that the stakeholders work. There was a new urban agenda that has been adopted in 2016, and there they say that the urban sector should be developed and the private sector should be developed, and human rights, well, they are mentioned, but they are not as important. And so in that agenda, we know that the rights of people are not really met. And so what we must do is try to be able to join everybody who is a stakeholder here. We must be aware of what is going on. We must be aware and weary. And so we also have to take into consideration the owners of the artificial intelligence systems. And also we need to have this idea of a national and transnational model of government. And so this is something that is pushing us and pushing onto us an autonomous city. And in many places, they would be able to have a transnational power.
Hay una palabra sobre el tema del control de los mercados, nada. Nada.
If you read, there is nothing on market control. There is no mention whatsoever in this EU document. They mention copyright, privacy, but there is no mention whatsoever. It is not a case it's not a case where the fundaments of the economy are openly discussed, which is being changed by artificial intelligence. Some small examples, but interesting ones. So digital platforms and real estate platforms started with Airbnb. Now they're invading everything. You know how it works. Apparently, according to the law, it is an issue of supply and demand. The law of supply and demand, in fact. In reality, not quite. At an international conference we organized as an alliance last year, scientists who presented reports with concrete data showed us that the owners of AI use algorithms from the competition. They build artificially platforms, cartels amongst owners, so that the cost that they expect to have is a certain one. And they demonstrate that it is an increase of 10–15% of the normal price. How does this work? Well, I will quickly now come to the end of my presentation. What do we propose regarding the strategy? Let it be pluriannual, multi-annual, with many actors. Let it be able to approach the penetration of AI by monitoring, firstly, AI in management and city governance. Something that was done before. I believe we can do a lot, not only with this type of events, but something more concrete. Secondly, raise awareness about the risks of AI. So, for example, all the conditions, for example, war was the gateway for AI. So AI is not neutral. Thirdly, training, capacity building of the stakeholders who share these signs. Not any stakeholder, but those who share these principles. Fourthly, having available tools, because there are tools, so we must think about how we can act in order to face AI. Using new tools, for example, someone mentioned solidarity algorithms. These are examples of local solutions. We must think differently, outside the box. So I also propose that we should build cities which are intelligent and have solidarity. Another important point is dialogue. So we can find this, we can promote this amongst trade union organizations, amongst and also to take into account human rights. Also the church, interestingly, there was a position by the Pope on this. We should also establish binding rules. They could be mere guidelines, but in order to achieve better justice at regional and international level, because if you approve and authorize a certain AI to commit some infraction, then it should be penalized. So the impunity of AI mustn't happen. It mustn't be an excuse. It is therefore important to debate this. And finally, these are just a few points that I've brought. We should try and experiment advanced participatory democracy models at local level, at EU level, and UN level, or local organizations committed to participatory democracy should play a key role with their allies. These are resident organizations, universities. We are ready, and I believe that you are also ready. Thank you very much.
The first applause being that the other were videos, so they didn't deserve the clap. Okay, so thank you very much. We are going to the end, but we wanted to interact with some of you. If you want, there will be a meeting tomorrow, especially for politicians, a meeting that there is always in the end of OIDP to reflect also on the axis of work for the next year to come, and at least until the next conference in Cordoba. So it could be interesting if OIDP would do an investment on this topic as one of the important one that we have to develop together, because each one of us, we are too small to do things alone. No? As Cesare was showing, the panorama is very big. So some questions. So I see people behind the scene to tell me, oh, the end. But if there are one or two questions first, if you still have energy after this long day, there will be a mic there. No? Dead? Okay, if there are no questions, I think I can leave the place to you.
Se não há então perguntas, concluímos com sucesso.
Well, if there are no questions, we can now conclude successfully this panel. Good evening and see you tomorrow. We'll be here at 9 a.m. Thank you very much.